Before we move on to working in Unreal Engine, let's talk about ways to optimize the scene. Number of polygons in the scene matters, but the most important is the number of draw calls. The speed of the project is affected by the number of frames per second (FPS). Each frame has its own cost, and we can measure it in milliseconds. During this process, the software calls the hardware to render what is in your scene, such as geometry and textures. The number of such requests is called draw calls. The complexity of each frame can be estimated using the number of draw calls. The more of them, the more time it takes for the system to process and the less frames per second you get. Of course, the speed is also affected by the number of dynamic light sources, materials, post-process effects, reflections and other components. At the initial stage of work, you should understand which system your project will focus on and the number of FPS it will give out. The level of optimization and the structure of the project will depend on this. Before we continue, let's compare the same asset in 3ds Max and Unreal Engine. In Unreal Engine, it has more polygons than in 3ds Max. This happens because polygons in 3ds Max are square, while in Unreal Engine they are triangular. When importing a mesh, Unreal Engine triangulates and splits each square polygon into two triangular. This is a normal process and should be taken into account. Let's do an experiment to understand how geometry affects draw calls. I will create a new project from the blank architectural template. Turn on the display of FPS and scene rendering statistics. To do this, use the console command stat unit. In this case, we are interested in the draws line, which shows the number of draw calls per frame in real time. Remove the start content objects from the scene. The number of draw calls has decreased. Now in the empty part of the scene, the value of draw calls is 151. Let's take this value as a zero reference point. Now I am importing the sofa from my project into the scene. As you can see, the sofa is made up of many individual meshes. Hold down the Shift key and select the first and last static mesh. Drag all components into the scene. The draws value has increased to 227. I subtract the number of draws of the empty scene, and it turns out that this object needs 76 draws. Now let's combine the elements of the sofa into a single mesh. To do this, activate the modeling mode on the panel in the upper left corner. In Outliner panel, select all the elements of the sofa. In the modeling panel, find the Mesh Ops tab. Click Merge and accept. Now all elements are combined into a single mesh. Here it is in the Outliner panel. Let's go back to selection mode. Unreal Engine created a separate asset from these elements. To find it, select an object. On the right side of the Details panel, find Static Mesh. Click Browse to. Here is the created asset. You can change a name of the asset in the Outliner panel list. Right-click on the asset. Edit. Rename. Let's compare the number of draw calls. Deselect the object. 194 minus 151 empty scene result 43 draws, which is almost 2 times less than the same object but consisting of several elements where were 76 draws. Combining meshes into a single asset is an effective geometry optimization method. I'll take this single mesh asset. Move the object with the Alt key press to create 25 instance static mesh components. Instance static mesh components is a more performant way to create multiple copies of the assets in the scene. As you remember, one asset takes 43 draws, but at the same time 25 instance static meshes require only 153 draws. That's why if you have copies of the same asset in the project, it's better to copy it as instance static mesh at the stage of work in Unreal Engine. Now let's look at another way to optimize instance static meshes. Select all instance static meshes. actor, merge actors, batch. Now a new actor object has appeared in the scene, which combines all the instant static meshes. I can remove hidden sofa asset in outliner panel. You can continue to move, rotate or scale the assets that are inside actor or move all objects by selecting the actor in outliner panel. Result 183 minus 151 equals 32 draw calls. Merging multiple instant static meshes into an actor is another way to reduce the number of draw calls. Let's summarize. Combining mesh elements into a single mesh is an effective solution for reducing draws in a scene. Copying objects is best done in Unreal Engine with instant static meshes. Combining instant static meshes into an actor using the batch tool also reduces the number of draws. Let's look at cancel commands to get statistics that will help you evaluate resource usage. Stat GPU. You can see the minimum, maximum and average value of the time spent on rendering by the GPU of all components of the project. To disable statistics, repeat the command you want to disable. Start draw count. Shows the number of basic scene elements such as lights, post-processing, fog. I recommend using these statistics to monitor system resource usage in order to achieve better performance.